if you save in dollars, you're destined to go broke. If you are not a contrarian and looking at the big picture, you're destined to be a victim, period. That is the reset. When everyone realizes that holding dollars to purchase energy is something that you don't need to do anymore, it's over. That's when you know the game is over. They are the world's largest regional military and financial institution on the planet, laying this infrastructure, doing it very quietly without trying to provoke President Trump, but it should not be taken lightly at all. My enemy's enemy is my friend. They're just making a blanket assumption that, oh, no one trusts China and no one trusts Russia. They don't even see the fact that no one trusts us. And I don't think they see the progress that is being made. They are laying the foundation, and once integrated into the foundation, it becomes very hard to unplug it. Quite frankly, I believe that the United States at the same time is trying its best to shed the world reserve currency. I think the passage of the Genius Act is the beginning of a new monetary system. The timeline on something like this will be very difficult because it's not in their vested interest to tell us how far along they are until they're bang, boom, done.
This is The Real Story with Michelle Makori.
Hello, I'm Michelle Makori, and this is The Real Story. Thank you for joining us. A new world order. That is what Chinese President Xi Jinping called for at the Shanghai Cooperation Organization's recent summit in Tianjin. More than 20 world leaders attended the SCO meeting, including Russia's Vladimir Putin and India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi. And together they unveiled the early architecture of a parallel financial and security system designed specifically to bypass the US-led order. Now, the SCO is no fringe group. It's the world's largest regional bloc. It represents nearly $30 trillion in GDP, which is about a quarter of the global economy. It includes close to half the world's population, and it controls vast reserves of energy, commodities, and critical raw materials. And Xi, Putin, and Modi stood shoulder to shoulder, signaling that when it suits them, these powers can align. And they rolled out an agenda that directly challenges Western dominance, including an SCO development bank seeded with billions, a proposal for joint SCO bonds, an Electro-yuan system to settle green energy projects in the Chinese currency, and the launch of China's BeiDou satellite network, literally wiring member economies into Beijing's orbit. Now, President Xi also used the summit to promote his global governance initiative. He pitched the SCO as the backbone of a multipolar order, a direct counterweight to U.S. leadership. Now, without naming the U.S. directly, Xi vowed to oppose hegemonism, Cold War mentality, and bullying practices, phrases often deployed by Beijing to criticize Washington. And then came the show of force. On September 3rd, China staged its largest military parade in decades. Hypersonic missiles, AI-driven tanks, a swarm of drones, and for the first time, its full land, sea, and air nuclear triad. Xi, flanked by Putin and Kim Jong-un, sent an unmistakable message. This emerging order has the military might to back it. Now, while the optics were very powerful, this was more than just symbolism. These were blueprints for a new financial, political, and security architecture being built in plain sight. And to follow up on the momentum, this week the BRICS held a virtual summit where Brazil's Lula denounced tariff blackmail, and Xi doubled down on his global governance initiative as the roadmap for the global south. And meanwhile, the de-dollarization trend accelerates, with central banks now holding more gold than U.S. Treasuries, and gold continues to hit new record highs. So what does all of this mean? To help us break it down and connect all the dots, let's bring in Andy Schectman. Andy, nice to have you back with us in the studio.
Good to be back.
And no one better to talk about this topic than you, because you were the first to really put the SCO, at least on my radar. You were talking about the Shanghai Cooperation Organization as a potential central player in the bifurcation of the global monetary system very early on. Again, before it was even considered an organization to pay any attention to. By way of background, it was started in 2001, China, Russia, and 4 Central Asian countries. And now this is a powerhouse. It represents over 40% of the world's population. And I recall you saying, watch this space as we look at the de-dollarization trend. So we have this meeting. We've had these pledges, these declarations, these proposals. How significant was this last summit?
Yeah, you're right, Michelle. The SCO was an organization to me that stuck out very early on because they are, just like the Eurasian Economic Union, very closely aligned to the BRICS, just like the Belt Road. Very, very closely aligned to the BRICS. Not all in it, not all the members are in it, but they are all very much closely aligned. And the president of Belarus for years has been saying we need to get these unions, the Eurasian Economic Union, the SCO, into the BRICS, just like the Belt Road. These countries are all very much connected and I believe loosely united against Western hegemony. Let's not forget, they represent not just a large portion of human population, 40+%, but also about 35% of global GDP. They are the world's largest regional military and financial institution on the planet. There was a little bit of a cautious undertone where there was criticizing of Trump's policies. But again, just like everything they've been doing lately, laying this infrastructure, doing it very quietly without trying to provoke President Trump, but it should not be taken lightly at all. This is a sign of things to come, another part of a growing union. And just to focus on BRICS and ignore very large and powerful and growing, not just financially, but also militarily, institutions like the SCO is a critical mistake that the West will make.
Well, they try to maybe fly a little bit under the radar, but one image certainly got Trump's attention, and that was Xi, Putin, and Modi rubbing shoulders, being all friendly, showing that when they need to, they can put any differences behind them and form an alliance. I mean, we had the footage of that, which is very impactful, very powerful images coming out of that summit. Trump responding to that by saying, looks like we've lost India and Russia to deepest, darkest China. May they have a long and prosperous future together. But then, it's a quick turnover in the world of geopolitics. Subsequently to that, we had Modi and Trump perhaps make up a bit. Modi posting India and the U.S. are close friends and natural partners. I'm confident that our trade negotiations will pave the way for unlocking the limitless potential of the India-U.S. partnership. Our teams are working to conclude these discussions at the earliest. I'm also looking forward to speaking with President Trump. We'll work together to secure a brighter, more prosperous future for both our people. And, that was in response to President Trump calling Modi his good friend, saying that the U.S. and India are continuing negotiations. So big picture here, Andy, it looks like India is still hedging its bets. India is still playing both sides here. How cohesive is this alliance when you still have India, one of the biggest players here, sort of, as I say, straddling the fence?
You could substitute the word India for Saudi Arabia, and you'll see the same thing. These are countries that understand the significance of playing both sides. And I use Saudi Arabia as a good example because they were so intimately involved in Enbridge and have joined or have been accepted into BRICS, and although haven't fully accepted, they attend all the meetings. The same thing with all the meetings in Novigrad last year. And look, India to me is straddling the middle, and I think that is something that they'll continue to do until this infrastructure is fully mature. They have, I believe, strong incentives, whether it be with Russia for cheap energy or China for manufacturing and technology. I think my enemy's enemy is my friend. I don't really believe that India believes the United States is its enemy, but I also think that they don't look at the United States the way that the United States thinks they look at them. Trump said this is a big deal for India. We are their largest trading partner, and here's 50% tariffs. Now, you levy 50% tariffs on your friend, that isn't very friendly. We've had this discussion before, the privilege of being the world reserve currency and Triffin's dilemma, which we won't get into now, but that talks about trade imbalances. And to levy 50% tariffs on India was wickedly overplaying his hand, because if you look under the surface, the GDP of India's GDP that goes towards trade with the United States is less than 2%. So the 2% of India's GDP, I didn't really say that very clear. So trade with the U.S. is 2% of India's GDP. And that, to me, is something that, look, I think, to me, cheap energy and mending fences with China and the big picture of a really growing legitimacy in the global South, the global East, is something Modi understands. And yet, you don't want to provoke Trump, but at the same time, you want to continue to foster and build relationships with these other countries, and that clearly is what's happening here and in Saudi Arabia.
We will tackle the trade balancing and Trump's proposal and aim to onshore manufacturing a little bit later on, because that is very significant to the conversation at large and Triffin's dilemma. But for now, let's focus on some of the hard issues that came out of this summit. And there were about 24 agreements that came out dealing with various security, environment, what have you. But on the economic front, we had a pretty significant development, I would argue, with the SCO Development Bank for the first time formally approved. She seeding it with 2 billion yuan in outright grants, another 10 billion yuan in loans through the Interbank Consortium over the next 3 years. People are looking at this and saying, we haven't seen anything this significant since Bretton Woods in 1944, when you had the IMF and the World Bank developed as pillars of the Western-led financial architecture. When you look at this SCO Development Bank, is it a real threat to the IMF and the World Bank? Is it setting down the railways for a non-dollar dominated financial architecture?
To your second question, absolutely. It is setting the rails down. It is not about challenging the IMF at this point or the World Bank. It's about building a parallel system. By Xi seeding it with $2 billion and promising more money up in the future for growing it through grants and whatnot, he's showing that he wants the SCO to be far much more than just talk. And when put together with the BRICS New Development Bank, Michelle, I think it becomes far more legitimate. You have the BRICS New Development Bank for growing emerging nations, and you have the SCO for the Eurasian countries. I think it is legitimate. It is setting the rails at this point. It isn't in direct challenge with the IMF, but when you take a step back and you put it in conjunction with the bridge technology, with the massive expansion of the Shanghai Metals Exchange throughout multi-jurisdictional vaults, with the internationalization of the yuan, all of these things that we see, and maybe most significantly, Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, saying that these technologies, whether it be BRICS Pay or BRICS Bridge, will be opened up to other nations, all nations with the exception of the European Union, the United States, and Great Britain. They won't have access to it. The rest of the world will have the ability to trade with these countries outside of SWIFT purview, and this is just another example. Now, the SCO Bank will be more for developing countries and infrastructure, not for challenging IMF dominance. But when all of these things are put together and formally finalized, yeah, the IMF and all of the Western institutions will, I think, greatly lose significance if left unchallenged, of course.
So the blueprint for a new monetary order.
100%.
To that point, we had Putin really pushing for SCO bonds. This is a proposal. It's still not taken, but it's strongly under consideration. And Putin wants a bond collectively issued and backed by various member countries. Is this feasible? Is this a potential threat to U.S. Treasuries? Does it take away from dollar demand? Should this happen? What's your read on the SCO bond?
If issued in local currencies or someday the shared currency like the unit, I guess you could say that it does give currencies the ability to trade without reliance on the West. And ultimately, it could go to challenge the West. But over time, it might even become like the Eurasian version of the U.S. Treasury. I wouldn't say that that is where we are going just yet, but people often talk about pushback to the BRICS as well. They don't have a bond market that can challenge the West. So here again, laying the seeds, laying the infrastructure for this to happen. And certainly over time, it would reduce demand not only for the U.S. dollar, but also the settlement status. So when you take a look at this big picture, all of these countries together trading in local currencies chips away at the settlement status of the U.S. dollar. Things like this and things like expansion of gold, which isn't replacing currencies, it's replacing what stands behind the currencies, just like this,
right,
chips away at the settle or the reserve status of the U.S. dollar
And
over time.
And I want to get to gold because, of course, one of the issues that these countries still have is lack of trust amongst each other and lack of credibility amongst each other. And of course, that's where gold comes in. And that's been an argument that you've made. But before we get there, I want to focus still a little bit more on these bonds. Who would likely buy these bonds? Do you see these bonds being potentially of interest to Western institutions?
No, not at this point anyway. This would be for, ultimately, whether it be underdeveloped countries or countries within the Union that want to break free from Western hegemony.
Could these bonds have a gold-backed component?
Absolutely, 1,000%. I don't see why not. Especially if they were issued in yuan, because again, we'll issue them in local currencies through the SCO bank. If issued in yuan, just like the Electro-yuan bond, just like the digital yuan, it is now convertible. It's not backed by, as we've talked about in our first interview together here, but its redeemability in yuan directly without having to convert to US dollars as they did before, and the ability to possess it in the new expanding Shanghai Metals Exchange vaulting system, the one that just was finished in Hong Kong. You can do that right now. And coincidentally, the next one is being built in Saudi Arabia.
Right.
So these countries will have the ability to, if they want, in some cases, stand for delivery in metals and using at this point only the digital yuan, but maybe over time it expands to other local currencies.
And again, this is a theme that we've discussed before. You have an alliance. They know what they don't like. They don't like the dollar. They don't like the U.S. They don't like the Western-led, global order. They want to do something on their own, but they don't really like each other that much. They still have trust issues. They still have credibility issues. They still have competing interests. And that is where ultimately this neutral reserve asset, gold, starts to factor in at every level of this new architecture.
Well, I would say the exact same thing is happening in the United States. No one trusts us anymore, and maybe that's why we're seeing all this gold flood into the United States. Maybe that's why we become net importers. Maybe that's why President Trump on Easter Sunday said, "He who has the gold makes the rules." Gold is becoming the de facto trust mechanism for the world, not just the BRICS. Who trusts China? Who trusts us? After weaponizing the dollar and doing what we've done with tariffs to our own friends, I think trust is something that is, on a central bank level, on a government level, is really hard to come by these days. And what gold does, it removes all of that. And so, yeah, I do think that's exactly spot on, as a matter of fact.
And we're going to unpack that in greater detail. I still want to focus a little bit more on the framework that we saw coming out of the summit, because I think it is significant to understand the details here, to your larger point that discreetly, quietly, they're laying down the railways, and then all of a sudden it's all ready to go. And one of the other things that I thought was pretty interesting was this Electro-yuan that came out of the summit. President Xi unveiling this using the Chinese currency, the yuan, to settle energy and infrastructure projects. He highlighted a wind power project in Uzbekistan already settled in RMB. He called for each SCO member to add 10 million kilowatts of new solar and wind capacity over the next 5 years. We know energy and power is a big issue going forward. We know the U.S. has major grid issues. But separately, we have this Electro-yuan, China's financing all of this. What do you make of this? Is this like the green equivalent of the petrodollar, in a way?
To me, it's the green equivalent of the Petro-yuan, which is a direct challenge to the petrodollar. You bring Saudi Arabia into the BRICS, they became, although they haven't, again, straddling, they were the fifth formal entry or member of Enbridge, again, showing where their allegiance truly is. They said that, yes, we will continue to take dollars last year when they severed the exclusivity and didn't re-sign the 50-year deal that they had, that Kissinger had set up. All of these things are happening, and when you look at the Petro-yuan bond, it's a bond that they would issue to buy oil that they then can convert that into yuan, into gold directly at the Shanghai Gold Exchange. That's been going on for a while. So you have the Petro-yuan, which deals in fossil fuels, and then you have this new, what's it called, the Electro-yuan, which is for green initiatives. Really, it's just to challenge the dollar's dominance in all global energy trade. Again, little by little, they are laying the foundation. You'll see this everywhere you look. They're setting the foundation in the understanding that it's about commodities, and it's about energy, and it's about renewables, and it's about precious metals, and, you know, uranium, rare earths, all of these things. Not only are they taking a massive position in through things like the Belt Road, the expansion of the BRICS, the countries that are joining, all have they're all very much resource rich. And here again, this is just going to show that here are ways to settle outside the dollar in everything from commodities like gold, or to things like renewable energy, or to fossil fuel energy like oil. It's just a continuation of laying the foundation.
Right, and I'm going to go from foundation higher up, and that's satellites, because this to me was a really big deal, and it's amazing how little attention this development got in the mainstream media, and that is China's BeiDou satellite infrastructure. We're going to give me a leeway on the pronunciation, but I'm pretty sure it's BeiDou satellites. So she opened up the satellite network to the SCO members. This is similar to the GPS system. It's more than navigation. It does provide accuracy to the centimeter, but it's critical for logistics, agriculture, energy grids, and payment processing, payment transactions, the timing of financial transactions. So in effect, we've got the SCO economies literally plugged in to Beijing's orbit here. How significant is this development?
Well, the most significant thing is, again, they are laying the foundation, and once integrated into the foundation, it becomes very hard to unplug it. In other words, to choose another system would be very, very difficult. And when you talk about a satellite that can go down to a centimeter for things like energy grids and agriculture, that's incredible. In terms of finance, the only thing I can think of is that it financial trades like this rely on ultra precise signals. So of course that has to be somewhere in the thinking of the SCO when they're using this. But I don't know. I think that the takeaway that I get is, once integrated, it makes it almost impossible to pull it out. It just goes to show that they're breaking free not only of Western hegemony, but also of the ability for the West perhaps to monitor all of the things that they're doing through using Western satellites and Western technology, like whatever they're using right now that isn't this Chinese system. Again, all part of a bigger picture.
I'm going to play devil's advocate here, push back a little bit. Critics will look at this and say, okay, they've tried this before. The BRICS have tried this with the New Development Bank. They pledged billions to that as well. Nothing really came of it. They also try to build an underwater system of cables to connect various countries. There have been infrastructure projects that the BRICS have tried and failed. Why is this time different?
The biggest mistake that all the analysts make who push back against this is, number one, they're dollar permeables. They believe that the West can never lose its grip on the hegemony. But more importantly, they don't have the patience to see the long game that the Chinese are playing. And the Chinese, I think, are playing a game that is far more sophisticated than what these analysts believe. They're expecting immediate results. Instant gratification isn't fast enough. But as you can see, they are thinking on every single level, on every level. And I think that it would be a very big mistake to downplay this and to underestimate it. So, yeah, there are a lot of things that they've tried that hasn't worked. But I wonder how many things the West has tried that hasn't worked as well. They can push back all they want, and everyone's entitled to their opinion. But I think to delegitimize what amounts to the majority of human population, when you put these groups together, the SCO, which is 40% of human population, the BRICS, which is, 40, 50, 60% of human population, the Belt Road, 75%, of course there's crossover, but the combination of 3 of the 4 largest nuclear arsenals, the majority of human population, the majority of commodity production and refining, the majority of manufacturing. Vietnam just joined China in the BRICS. And so you have all of this stuff coming together, along with rails that are being built that are not aligned with or not compatible with the SWIFT or the West, all the way down to GPS coordinates and satellite technology and military technology. Anyone who underplays this, I think, is a fool. And to their credit, largely, I think, because of what the BIS did by pulling out. You're not going to see media coverage of all of this. It's not going to be very easy and visible to see. Now, you're looking for it. I'm looking for it. But a lot of the analysts, they're not really looking for it. They're just making a blanket assumption that, oh, no one trusts China and no one trusts Russia. They don't even see the fact that no one trusts us. And I don't think they see the progress that is being made. Again, individually, the things that they are doing are impressive and, okay, great. Put them all together and it becomes a whole much more impressive, I think, group of legitimacy. So, you know, I think you'll get pushback on everything until it's right in your face and they're like, wow, I can't believe how far they've come with this. You and I won't feel that way, but a lot of the Western media will.
Slowly then suddenly, as you say, little by little.
Exactly.
So we're building this infrastructure. We've got the technological plumbing, the banks, potentially the bonds, as we talked about, other mechanisms to settle. But as you've just said, and again, this is such an important point here, is that there's still lack of trust. These countries still do not trust one another. And that is where, you know, gold comes into all of this. This is where we're seeing central banks buying gold at record levels, as we've discussed, gold taking over U.S. Treasuries in terms of the asset held by central banks for the first time since 1996. Talk us through why gold is the underpinning of all of this infrastructural change for the anti-West alliance and how you see it all sort of fitting in.
You're right. I mean, they are building the tools, the banks, the bonds, the satellites, digital payment rails. But to your point, trust is fragile and legitimate. To me, gold is the anchor of credibility, period. While at the same time you have the digital RMB and the M-Bridge that provide the pipes to move value across borders without the dollar, gold is I think the de facto credibility anchor. And I think you're seeing that here in the United States. I think that there is a certain faction of people within the Trump administration who have alerted him to this, that, you know, hey, we're not trusted anymore. And that's exactly what the Russian foreign minister just said in that interview the other day, talking about this, that the West is trying to do this new system because no one trusts the dollar anymore. And maybe they understand that. All of the selling of U.S. Treasuries, all of the gold coming into the United States. What does that mean? We become net importers. Massive amounts of gold coming in every single month. Billions and billions and billions. And no one knows who it is. Is it the Exchange Stabilization Fund? Is it the Treasury Secretary doing this under the guise of national security? Or who is it? The point is that for the last several years, the central banks, who are not only the most well-funded, they are by far the most well-informed traders in the world. They are gobbling up gold quietly, using the Western suppressed price in order to run cover for it, hand over fist. What is truly unique is that it's now happening in the United States. There is a recognition by the big players, the big money, the informed money, that gold is significant and is being reintegrated into the system. However that system plays out, it represents the trust in what has become a trustless universe, where countries and banks don't trust one another, and rightfully so. Gold will give the ability, I think, for these countries to once again begin to trust one another.
Before we get into how the U.S. may have to beat them at their own game, which is something that you've alluded to, I want to talk about, you know, the potential reaction to this, you know, from the Trump administration. As you say, this is on the radar, and losing the dollar status as the global reserve currency has something that Trump has said would be akin to losing a huge war. He made this comment, I believe, several weeks ago regarding the BRICS nations, but it certainly applies. The sentiment still applies now. Let's take a listen.
BRICS was set up to degenerate our dollar and take our dollar as the standard, take it off as the standard. And that's okay if they want to play that game, but I can play that game too. So anybody that's in BRICS is getting a 10% charge. But what they're trying to do is destroy the dollar so that another country can take over and be the standard. And we're not going to lose the standard at any time. And if we lost the world standard dollar, that would be like losing a war, a major world war. We would not be the same country any longer. We're not going to let that happen. The dollar, you ever hear the expression, dollar is king? The dollar is king. We're going to keep it that way, okay?
So, Andy, we've discussed this before, the potential U.S. pushback, but I play that now because perhaps it's no coincidence that right after the summit, we have this ginormous military parade by China, right? This is obviously economic warfare, akin to a war. And then we have China showing off its military capabilities. And I was looking at analysis from military experts. What was intentionally displayed here was to send a message. We had China's nuclear triad for the first time. That's shown China has land-based intercontinental missiles, nuclear-capable bombers, submarines armed with nuclear missiles beneath the sea. Only a handful of nations in history have reached that level of deterrence. So it's like, if you nuke us, we got two other ways to get back at you, is basically what that's saying. Hypersonic next-generation missiles able to maneuver at several times the speed of sound, designed to hold U.S. aircraft carriers at risk, a direct challenge to what would be American military planning. These unmanned systems, drones, swarms of them, robotic vehicles, all of this was on display. Unmanned submarines, all of this, energy-focused weapons, all of this on display for the United States to see. Now, granted, a lot of this is probably industrial espionage. We know that China doesn't really pay attention to intellectual property rights, and I imagine that most of this is American technology that we probably already have as well. But I think the messaging here is very important, right? They're saying we're launching this new financial architecture, and P.S., look at our weapons. Like, what's your read on that?
Exactly. I mean, you just said it. I mean, they're signaling this isn't economic, that it's far more than that, that there's military deterrence involved here as well. And this is not just about financial, it's also technological warfare, or alternatives rather needed to shift global governance, global power. It's legitimate. I mean, the rumor is that the United States doesn't have the hypersonic technology. And again, you know, when you get to this level of sophistication by a country that is just one of 3 countries that have this kind of technology, or serious technology, in the BRICS nations, between, you know, China and Russia and India, all possess nuclear weapons. China kind of being on top of all of this is just simply saying that you want to push back against us in any way. That wouldn't be wise. And anyone who watches that and listens to the way you describe these kinds of weapons, it's terrifying to think of what would happen if they were silly enough. A lot of people think, like Martin Armstrong, that, yeah, we're getting close to World War III. This is their way of saying, don't even think about it. For the betterment of the world, let us do our thing. You do your thing, but if you mess with this is something that you'll have to deal with. And I think there's no coincidence that they put that stuff on display.
And, you know, Andy, since the very first time that you flagged this whole idea to me, I said the U.S. is not going to let this go without a fight, right? So I think, and to me, not that I'm rooting for a kinetic war, but it seems to be a possibility. But then you have this display from China, and then that, you know, makes people take a step back in terms of that as a possible, you know, way to thwart this. Important to point out, though, that, you know, this is a parade, so it is all for show. We don't really know how these things work, how much of it is illusion versus reality. China hasn't really fought a war in 50 years. So, you know, putting that sort of caveat aside, no coincidence that right after this military parade, Trump decides he wants to rename the Department of Defense the Department of War, and he issues an executive order, and he says that the name Department of War, more than current Department of Defense, ensures peace through strength, as it demonstrates our ability and willingness to fight and win wars on behalf of our nation at a moment's notice, not just to defend. So, where is your thinking in terms of a kinetic war here? I mean, is it saber rattling? Is it just like, we've got our weapons, you have your weapons, let's not even go that way?
Yes, I think both. I think Xi, Putin, and Trump understand that. Anyone who doesn't's a fool. That it's advanced to I mean, you know, people in this country have never experienced what we all watch on TV, and that is other countries being attacked in their own homeland. And God forbid it became something here. These nations have the ability to do it. These hypersonic missiles can reach the United States mainland in a matter of minutes. So yeah, I think that this is something that is just a message that, in particular, Trump's renaming of it the Department of War, that they're prepared to use force to defend their own interests rather than defending. And again, it's symbolic more than anything. I would like to hope that it's more theater, more stage, more theater. Because quite frankly, I believe that the United States at the same time is trying its best to shed the world reserve currency. And we've talked about this before. So he says one thing very often and does the other. It's misdirection, which we've talked about before. They're misdirecting in all of the things. Well, you should focus more on this and what could happen. And we're not going to lose the dollar status, while over here they're able to do things that aren't really focused on. So yeah, I think it's saber rattling. God forbid it's not. We all have bigger problems. Certainly you don't need to worry about your finances at that point. So I think it's relevant, but it is saber rattling.
Okay, so then that brings us to the U.S. response and what you think has been going on behind the scenes. Because war, not a favorable option to either party, regardless of how they may posture and position themselves. And so you have said in our previous conversations that you think that the U.S. is seeing that the other countries are adding gold to their reserves, that this may come to a monetary reset where gold does emerge as a neutral reserve asset, and that the U.S. is planning on beating them at their own game. So for those that have not watched our previous interviews, we will link to them below, but give us a quick recap of how you think the U.S. is then indeed responding to this potential threat.
Well, I think that's exactly what they are doing. I think the passage of the Genius Act is the beginning of a new monetary system to find demand for a treasury that is losing demand, a synthetic demand to run the daily workings of the U.S. government. If Scott Bessent is correct, over $2 trillion a year would be created, and probably a lot more, in U.S. Treasury demand through issuance of stablecoins by every bank and every corporation like Visa, MasterCard, American Express. All the banks would issue stablecoins that would then be backed one-to-one by U.S. Treasuries. This runs the front end of the market. Look, I think what Trump is trying to do, if I'm right, is to bring back manufacturing. Let's just call it what it is. If we don't, we're dead in the water, right? We're massively indebted. 60% of the country has no college education. AI is going to kneecap a lot of the good-paying jobs, and we're reliant on other countries like China to manufacture our pharmaceuticals, our aircraft parts, our military parts, all of these things that we don't manufacture anymore. At the same time, all of those good-paying jobs have left. Now, how do you bring the dollar? How do you bring those countries back, or how do you bring those companies back from other countries? This is where Triffin's dilemma comes into play. This is why Vice President Vance wrote on White House letterhead that it's no longer a benefit to the United States to be the world reserve currency. Quietly, he said that. The issue is simply this, that I think what they're going to try and do is to, first of all, bring back all the gold. We've seen that. Massive amounts, and yet no one knows who's buying it. I really do believe it's the U.S. Treasury. Massive amounts, and I think a lot more is coming in that isn't being reported. Vince Lancy talks about 80 to 85% of all the gold moving around the world by central banks is not being reported to the IMF. It's not going into the COMEX. It's not going into places that would require reporting. Maybe it's going elsewhere. But let's just take the COMEX at face value. Well north of $100 billion in gold has been imported since the beginning of the year. So if we listen to what Judy Shelton told me, she said, Andy, on July 4th, 2026, which is the 250th anniversary of the country, the big day for Trump, he's going to issue gold-backed treasuries. All right, so let's just put it all together. And by the way, I said, Judy, will he revalue gold? After all, it's held in the gold revaluation account. And she's more or less said, yes, I do believe that he will. Now, what does James Rickards say? James Rickard, who is a very smart man who has been brought into the Pentagon to simulate financial war games, says $24,000 an ounce would be his number. And he gets there by dividing the money supply into the gold, whatever. If you did this, you're revaluing gold, but in essence what you're doing is massively devaluing the dollar, which is what Stephen Mirren, the author of the Mar-a-Lago Accord, has written about, and he's now where? At the Fed, filling the vacant spot. all you keep hearing about is Trump wanting to lower interest rates, right? And so how do you bring back your manufacturing when we are $38 trillion in debt on the balance sheet? Forget about the unfunded liabilities. How do you bring back your manufacturing in a strong dollar and with interest rates not going to the moon? You don't. So you devalue the dollar by revaluing gold. I believe they will. You peg gold to the back end of the Treasury market, the 2, the 5, the 10, the 20, the 30, and then ultimately the 50, as Judy said. You put maybe 1% interest on the 30 and the 50, no interest on the shorter duration bonds, and they are redeemable in gold. So the front end of the curve, when we talked about this before, you said, well, what about the front end? There it is, the Genius Act, the demand that is synthetic runs the front end of the curve, the yield curve, through the issuance of stablecoins. The back end has virtually zero coupon on it, no interest. Maybe a little bit on the 30 and the 50 she hedged at, but no interest on anything else. The redeemability in gold acts as the interest. Why do you do that? You're able to bring back your manufacturing at zero borrowing costs. Yes, you have to deliver the gold at some point, but up front, zero borrowing costs, you bring your manufacturing back. By revaluing gold, if Jim was right, and it got to 24,000, it would give the Treasury General Account $6 trillion free and clear. An accounting gimmick, yes, but it would give the Treasury General Account, with every $4,000 increase in gold, $1 trillion free and clear to the Treasury. The act of revaluing gold devalues the dollar. The Russian foreign finance minister was just talking about this the other day, said this exact same thing. Maybe he's been listening to me. I don't know. But it devalues the dollar greatly. Now, why would you do that? Because now you can sell your manufactured goods across the globe. What did Vice President Vance say? Being the world reserve currency isn't such a good deal for us anymore. So you peg the back end of the market to gold with zero borrowing costs, like Judy Shelton said. You have the stable coins running the front end to run the daily workings of the government. You bring back your manufacturing at zero borrowing costs and sell your goods to the world in a devalued dollar. Now, the only side effect that I could really see would be the issuance of universal basic income for a lot of people for a few years. But Trump would look the world in the face and say, hey, this is a problem that we've created, and the only way out is to grow our way out, and we can't do it unless we bring back manufacturing. So we're going to issue universal basic income for just a little bit. We're going to do it in order to give our children and our grandchildren a future. Honest to God, I believe that's what they're doing. And in my soul, I do. And I guess we'll see. But this is the pushback, and this is exactly what that gentleman was saying. I think you're going to play a clip of it in a little bit. I'm sure you are. I don't know, but I'm hoping you are. But I'm simply saying they get it.
Right.
It's very crystal clear.
Well, I actually want to play a couple of clips to substantiate what you're saying, because it's great to hear it from you, but I think it's even more impactful when we hear it straight from the horse's mouth. And we do have some clips of President Trump and J.D. Vance both saying that they want a weaker dollar. Let's play those now.
I'm a person that likes a strong dollar, but a weak dollar makes you a hell of a lot more money. Hate to tell you. When we have a strong dollar, one thing happens. It sounds good. But you don't do any tourism, you can't sell tractors, you can't sell trucks, you can't sell anything. When you have a strong dollar, you can't sell anything. It's only good for inflation, and it's good psychologically. It makes you feel good. But with that being said, I love strong dollars, but you make your money with a currency. And I had so many different fights with President Xi, between Japan and China. All they want to do is have a weak...
The reserve currency status is a massive subsidy to American consumers, but a massive tax on American producers. And when I look at the American economy, we have a lot of financial engineers and a lot of diversity consultants. We don't have a lot of people making things. And I worry that the reserve currency status and the lack of control we have over our currency is perhaps driving that.
I mean, exactly what you've been saying, but coming straight from the president and the vice president. So I want to help our viewers understand this Triffin's dilemma thing. I did an interview with Luke Groman on it. We unpacked it at length, but it all leads back to your thesis of what you think is happening. Triffin's dilemma. You cannot be the world's global reserve currency without running deficits at home, because you need to have more dollars out there, but then you risk damaging the fundamentals of your own economy. You have to run deficits, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So explain why at some point this has become like so problematic, and how this whole idea of, as you say, sacrificing the dollar, weakening the dollar, but backing up the treasury system with gold would sort of solve this issue.
Well, it's a bridge. It's a bridge to becoming a great country again. Not to say this country's not great, but we don't make anything anymore. And you're right, when you're the world reserve currency, everyone needs dollars to transact business. We cannot provide them enough dollars to trade alone, so we have to export dollars. They have to buy dollars, which weakens their currency and strengthens ours, which means over time, when you look at the relationship between a strong dollar and weaker currencies around the globe, well, you can manufacture your stuff at a fraction of the cost. Your manufacturing gets hollowed out over time, is in essence what it refers to. But how do you bring back your manufacturing and grow your way out of this problem? My mentor, Richard Russell, used to say the Fed has two choices but to inflate or die, because we're too far down the road. And so bringing back manufacturing sounds great. But if we brought back manufacturing and still were the world reserve currency, first of all, the cost of everything that we want to buy here at home goes parabolic. As he mentioned, he said it's a subsidy to the American consumer, but a tax on the producer. Why is it a subsidy to the consumer? Because we've asked everyone to give us their goods for dollars that we create out of thin air, and then better yet, take their excess profits and put it into treasuries, which puts interest rates low, which then makes our asset prices, our homes and our stocks, high. It keeps the goods we buy at Walmart cheap and interest rates low. That is the benefit of it. But we've gone so far down the road of mismanagement of fiscal and monetary policy. We're so far indebted, and we don't make anything. And now AI is going to take a lot of the good-paying jobs. It's a problem. We need to bring it back not only to put people to work, but for national security. And it's a noble cause, but in a very high-priced dollar, even if you brought them back, no one would buy your stuff. To convert to an expensive dollar first, it ain't going to happen. And so what he's basically, in my mind, saying is that it's the lesser of two alternatives. Instead of inflating or defaulting, it's option three. Soft default on the dollar to create demand for the Treasury by pegging it to gold, and revaluing gold to a much higher level to devalue the dollar. Not to revalue gold per se, but to devalue the dollar. And by the way, who would it benefit? Not just the U.S. All the central banks have been copiously buying gold. They're going to benefit from it too. But the devaluation of the dollar is exactly what they want to do, not only to sell our goods across the globe, that's the important part, but also to make paying off the debt easier. So how do you get out of your debt? You print, you default, or you grow. Well, we're going to do a little bit of both. Not so much the default part, hopefully, but we're going to print, and we're going to massively depreciate the dollar to bring back manufacturing, to grow our way out for future generations, to give them the ability for the United States to lead the world again in ingenuity and production, because that's something that we haven't done for a very long time.
You know, for the greater good, to make America a sovereign nation, not dependent on adversaries, bring back supply chains, make us a country that makes things again.
100%.
You know, Andy, since we spoke about this, and it was, 4 weeks ago, there have been even more signs that this is becoming mainstream.
It kind of
right?
freaks me out, actually. I mean, honestly, I think maybe once I got lucky with the BRICS, calling it before others did. This freaks me out. Like, I said it publicly, and I even said to you, maybe I'm stupid or just brave enough to say something I believe in. The fact that it's happening, truly, it freaks me out that it's happening.
Look, to that point, one of the signs, a couple of weeks after you said that, the Federal Reserve came out with a paper saying they were looking at revaluing America's gold reserves, a research note titled Official Reserve Revaluations, the International Experience, and it outlines how 5 countries used gains on their official gold holdings to raise funds. Now, the Fed did not recommend that the U.S. devalue its gold, didn't go that far, but it laid out in detail how other countries have done it. That's like one of the trickles. As we
It's a crumb.
It's a crumb. As we talked about before, The president's own son has alluded to that. He's speaking granted in his capacity as a spokesperson for a gold ad, and I think we'll pull it up. He says, Patriot, did you know that the U.S. government has the legal power to change the price of gold with a stroke of a pen? Let me share what Washington insiders are quietly discussing. My father's administration is exploring a powerful economic tool, the Gold Reserve Act. This law gives the Treasury the authority to revalue America's gold reserves on the national balance sheet from their outdated book value of $42 to current market prices. He goes on to say, why would my father's administration do this? It would immediately strengthen America's financial position, signal gold's renewed importance in our monetary system, prepare America for a new era of sound money principles. And as you can see at the bottom of that ad is Donald Trump Jr.'s signature. Now, again, granted, he is speaking in his capacity as a spokesperson for a gold company, but you start to add all of these things together. Now, last time I spoke to you, I said, why would the U.S. want to do it? That would be signaling lack of faith in the currency itself. And central banks love having the capacity to print their own currency. But now when you put it into the context of they may not even really have a choice.
They don't.
Because, go on.
They don't. They don't have a choice. Everyone talks about trading in local currencies and settling imbalances in gold over there. That's what the whole talk of the bridge network is, right? I think they understand this. The United States understands we do not have a choice. And being the world reserve currency was a wonderful privilege. We squandered it. But now we have to take care of our country. So is it the currency or the country? The currency or the economy? In other words, they're going to default on the currency to save the economy. How do you save the economy? You bring back manufacturing. How do you bring back manufacturing? You massively devalue the dollar by revaluing gold. And you peg it to the back end of the market in order to have zero borrowing costs to do it. And then you grow your way out so that the economy has the ability to make this country great again in terms of producing things instead of consuming far more than we produce, which is where we are. We're a consumer now, right? That's what they call us, consumers. And that just kind of is a play on words, but it's true. We're not producers anymore. We're consumers, and we need to be producers. Successful countries produce more than they consume. That's how you save. That's how you grow, and that is how you become a very solid, stable economy. We are anything but. We're in debt, and we consume far more than we produce. We must bring it back to give our children and our grandchildren a future. But not only that, during the pandemic, it was a very stark reminder that all the penicillin is made in China. So if we are reliant on countries like China for things like penicillin or things like pharmaceuticals or aircraft parts, or remember all the cars that were sitting empty in lots, thousands upon thousands, because they didn't have microchips, well, you can see the ramifications of outsourcing manufacturing. The only way to bring it back is to shed the reserve status, period. That's what we are quietly doing. Now, if you were to say it out loud, Trump says, it would be like losing a war. If you said, we're going to shed the world, everyone would dump dollars and bang, you're dead. It has to be misdirection. It has to be slowly happening. Oh, do you see what they're doing? I know you want to ask me a question. Do it.
Well, the question is, can you still maintain the dollar as the transactional aspect of it? And this is something that I discussed with Luke Groban. You can have a neutral reserve asset, but the dollar can still be somehow the most used medium of exchange.
I don't think so. And I don't think ultimately it will be the most used medium of exchange, because who would want to take a dollar that loses copious amounts of value? I think if you hold dollars, you're destined to go broke. The dollar's down 11% this year, and we haven't even done anything yet. So no, I don't really think the dollar will be the global go-to currency. Now the bond market
So what would be?
Well, I think everyone will use their own currencies. It will be local currencies on different rails settling imbalances in gold. And the strongest currencies will be the ones that are most favorably used. But it would make each and every country be far more fiscally and monetarily prudent, conservative, better stewards of their own economy. It grows their own economies. And at the same time, if they don't take good care of it, either they will be somewhat locked out of the global trade system, or we just immediately buy gold with it, and you'll end up getting far more gold for these depreciated, devalued, icky currencies if you trade with them. I don't know, I just think that the likelihood in this scenario of the dollar being the preeminent vehicle for trading when it's copiously losing value is a sucker's game, and I think that the world will understand that before this is all said and done.
So a multipolar world, what does it mean for Americans holding dollars?
It means if you hold dollars, you're destined to go broke. Now that's just today. What happens 10 years from now if we brought everything back and we're the powerhouse manufacturing country of the world and we got our act together? Could it be a very large speed bump? Sure, it could be. There is reason for optimism once we bring it back. But the issue is we must bring it back. There is no easy way to do it, period. That's what happens when you get as indebted as we are. There is no easy way out. And when the world starts no longer wanting our treasuries and or our dollars, then we have a really big problem. So this is kind of, I think, getting in front of it, if you will, before the collective realization around the world is that if you hold dollars and you hold treasuries, you're going to go broke.
Let's bring it to demand for U.S. Treasuries, because you started to touch on it, and that's the Genius Act, which is regulated stablecoin issuance, and it forces issuers to back stablecoins with either U.S. dollars or short-term treasuries. So it's transforming a billion-plus market for stablecoins into direct demand for U.S. Treasuries. It is genius. It really is genius if you look at it that way. And
or diabolical.
We'll get there. But genius, diabolical, depends on your perspective. Depends where you're coming from at this. But, in crypto, you need stable coins, off-ramp, on-ramp, because other cryptos have so much volatility that stable coins are very integral to the crypto ecosystem. So this is expected to help create some demand for U.S. Treasuries. There are two angles that are very interesting here. And before I get into what you said, the Russians' responses to this, we're having a conversation about U.S. Treasuries and stablecoins and crypto, and yet somehow gold is working its way into this conversation as well. We have Tether, the world's largest issuer of stablecoin, USDT, appearing to plan a full-scale entry into the gold mining business. Tether, according to the Financial Times, looking to expand across the entire gold supply chain from mining and refining to trading and royalties. Tether just boosted its stake to nearly 38% in the gold royalty company, Elemental Altus, adding another $100 million there. They're using crypto profits to build gold exposure. And we had the CEO of Tether, Paolo Adroni, putting it this way. He said, while Bitcoin is often called digital gold, gold is like nature's Bitcoin to us. But very interestingly, he said again this week, he posted on X, and we have that post, Bitcoin, gold, and land are the hedge against incoming darker times.
Isn't that what we've said since you got here? That I've felt for a long time to unite the two communities. Cryptocurrencies allows you, and it has, generational wealth accumulation, but put that in take the profits and put it into gold. You have a whole system that this is all about a response to weakening dollar demand and the understanding of a weakening dollar. So whether it be central banks doing this, tying gold, or the redeemability like China and their digital yuan, or gold backing the unit settlement currency, or all of these countries with the ability to settle in gold. You continue to hear gold as the anchor to the system. And what is genius about the Genius Act is creating synthetic demand for something that is losing demand. It is diabolical. And it really, you talk about the word stable. Is it really stable when you're backing something stable with debt? And a dollar that's depreciating? It's not really stable, but it still does the same thing. It continues to fund the government. And I think that's what this is the realization that the dollar is weakening, the system is moving. Things don't always repeat, but they rhyme. And we're not going to see a redeemability in currency the way that we did prior to 33 when Roosevelt confiscated gold, where you could take a $20 gold coin and get a $20 gold certificate at the bank and vice versa, but they will use it to anchor the system. I believe on a central bank level, where countries can take those currencies in transactions at that level and redeem it in gold. That holds their feet to the fire. And I also think it will be redeemable in treasuries, whether it be just in the United States, maybe the SCO issues bonds, redeemable in gold. Bang, just like that, you got demand for it. Okay, I don't trust them, but hey, it's redeemable in gold and it's held on Enbridge and we can see it, and it's held in these multi-jurisdictional vaults, even one in Saudi Arabia. You know what? I'm in. So the point of it is that gold is the anchor. The digital rails are the validity and the verification. And I think, to Tether's credit, they understand this. It is a melding of two forms of wealth. But again, it's the anchor in response to a weakening trust in the dollar system. That's what it's all about to me.
You did use the word diabolical for the Genius Act, and I would be amiss if I did not point out the concerns that it is a gateway to CBDC, central bank digital currencies, because these are essentially ways to program and control the currency. So there has been some concern that the Genius Act does sort of lay the groundwork for that.
Maybe you don't even need to do it, because you have the digital ID, which is, it has the ability to, if you look at the digital ID 2020, look at the patents, they have the ability to combine your medical records, your birth certificate, all of this stuff in your ID. At the same time, you have, if everyone is using stablecoins issued by third parties, well, first of all, if you don't think these third parties are regulated up the yin-yang and that the federal government will be monitoring the on-ramp and the off-ramp, that's right. So they'll monitor the on-ramp and the off-ramp, and they can shut you down. And it was like, I was listening to an interview with the developer for BRICS Pay, and he talked about, this is the B2B side of things, that the retail part that is being rolled out right now in the Belt Road Initiative. And he said our technology has KYC, AML, and KYT ability. Now, we take, Miles Franklin is one of the few licensed and bonded companies in America. This is why we left our company in Minneapolis, or at least our corporate office, because it's the only state that regulates this industry. And I've taken all of the classes. I'd never heard of KYT transaction before. What the heck is KYT?
Know your transaction.
Know your transaction. And that's the point. They'll know what you're buying, where the money came from, and who you are, and in conjunction with the digital ID, all of these things, and everyone relaxing their stance on a central bank digital currency. It's a central bank digital currency almost in a stablecoin clothing,
right,
if you will.
Yeah, that's the whole argument, that it is a CBDC in, a Trojan horse for CBDCs. But I want to bring it back to gold. How, again, even with this conversation with Tether, with stablecoins, you have gold, and you started to touch on the reaction from Putin's advisor, Kobyakov, to the Genius Act. He's calling it a crypto scheme. We have him speaking. We'll play it, but I will translate because I'm sure the Russian isn't as good. But we have the translation of what he says, and he says the U.S. has devised a crypto scheme to erase its massive debt at the world's expense. The U.S. is now trying to rewrite the rules of the gold and cryptocurrency market. Remember the size of their debt, $35 trillion. It's actually more than that. These two sectors, crypto and gold, are essentially alternatives to the traditional global currency system. Washington's actions in this area clearly highlight one of its main goals: to urgently address the declining trust in the dollar. As in the 1930s and the 1970s, the U.S. plans to solve its financial problems at the world's expense, this time by pushing everyone into the crypto cloud. He goes on to say, over time, once part of the U.S. national debt is placed into stablecoins, Washington will devalue that debt.
Have you been watching my shows?
And start from scratch. But he says that's the reality for those who are so enthusiastic about crypto. Now, I'm going into the minute details of what these people are saying because I think it's important, because I think it only goes to substantiate your
1,000%.
Broader arguments.
And every argument we hear keeps going down the same pathway. It's the only way that this works.
But he said crypto and gold. That's what's interesting, because the Genius Act doesn't mention anything about gold. I mean, I just brought in the Tether connection, but here he goes and says crypto and gold in the same sentence.
Because he sees the inflows into the United States. He's listened to Besant's comments about remonetizing the asset side of the balance sheet. He probably has listened to my interview with Judy Shelton. I'm joking, but there are people talking about pegging gold to the Treasury market, and everyone's talking about revaluing, including the Federal Reserve. We've done it in 33, as he mentions, and 72 and 73, when Nixon revalued gold from 35 to 38, from 38 to 42.22. He understands it. We're going to devalue our debt. We're going to revalue gold. That's the only way you devalue the dollar. And then you have the ability to, in essence, anyone who's holding U.S. dollars or U.S. debt, they're taking it in the shorts. I mean, he gets it. It's exactly what we're saying, just in a different way. And I couldn't agree more with him. He's spot on. The Russians are wise to what we're doing, but there's not a lot they can do to push back. In fact, the devaluing of the dollar and the revaluing of the gold ultimately only benefits them. They don't hold our debt anymore. So for them, we're strengthening their position. But I think he's spot on in what he said.
I just think it's so interesting how little by little we're getting more and more pieces, more and more dots to connect. You know, I mentioned earlier how Trump Jr. was talking about revaluing the gold. I'll also point out that they're also big into Bitcoin, the Trump family. They made a Bitcoin a central part of their financial playbook. They had the American Bitcoin company debut on the NASDAQ. Company mines Bitcoin. It's also a Bitcoin treasury company. It's co-founded by Eric Trump. Trump Media and Technology Group, which operates Truth Social, has already become one of the largest corporate holders of Bitcoin. About 15,000 Bitcoin on its balance sheet. It's actually the 8th largest public holder of Bitcoin worldwide. So it's, you know, again, very interesting to me that these guys know what's going on, right? They're the
Isn't
president's son.
It's who has the information.
So they're talking gold and they're talking Bitcoin. And there's definitely more evidence leaning that the world is going with gold based on the fact that we've seen central banks purchasing it. But the question of will we see a kind of monetary reset seems to me to become less of a question and more of an inevitability.
Of course. It is an inevitability. There has to be, you either inflate your way out, which leads to hyperinflation and ultimately a default, or you just outright default, or you choose this road less traveled. When I first talked with you in Vancouver years ago, I said that they were trying to find a villain, and that was because the Biden administration was just too silly with their policies. They were overtly trying to dump the dollar. This is a different plan, yet the same result. They have to reset the system somehow. And so you default on the dollar to bring back manufacturing. You go through a period, it's like the Shawshank Redemption. It's going through the tube that Andy Dufresne had to crawl through to get to the other side. It will be unpleasant for a lot of people. And I just think that the key to getting through this is to own assets, like Bitcoin, like gold. And, you know, it's assets that will get you through this. Having your wealth in dollars, you're in big trouble. And I think that's what you're seeing, the world divest of dollars and buy assets. Even the Trumps are doing the same thing. But the Russian finance minister nailed it right on the head. These things are happening. And if either you get with it or you're going to get rolled by it, I am convinced of it. And all of these things that we keep seeing are only kind of putting an exclamation point above my beliefs.
We talked about this before, and I said that whilst on paper the U.S. officially holds the most gold, we know that China has been buying gold at massive levels and taking gold directly from mines. So we're not even so sure that the U.S. is the top holder of gold. So again, for those not familiar with our previous conversation, why is it in the U.S.'s interest to do this if other countries will be ahead of them?
It's just the only way out. I mean, where did Gaddafi's gold go? Where did the 12 billion in gold go that the Ukraine sold? Where's Saddam Hussein's gold? I mean, and we haven't reported it either. So maybe we have more gold, all this gold coming in. Maybe there's a whole hell of a lot more gold coming in that we don't know about because it isn't reported, as Vince Lancy said. No one's reported their gold. Alistair McLeod would say that they have far more than we do, that they have somewhere in the neighborhood of 38,000 metric tons. That was 2 years ago. So they're the largest producers in the world. They hardly sell an ounce. I think it's the lesser of two evils. And you want to have any hope of starting over and retaining credibility, you do so by bringing back your manufacturing and still having bonds that are redeemable in gold, so that all of a sudden you have a little bit of trust, which enables you to bring back your infrastructure without literally blowing up the entire system here in the United States. It's going to be painful, especially for people, lower income people who don't have assets. And this is the big deal. Either understand that and do the best you can to mitigate your exposure to the U.S. dollar and buy tangible assets, or you're going to watch your standard of living decrease massively. And this year's no different. I mean, in the first 8 months of the year, we're down 11+% on the dollar. Gold's up almost 40. The net result is a 50% swing. This is why the wealthy people, and is there any coincidence that it's happened since all this gold starts coming into the country? No. Yeah, you're going to benefit them, but at the same time, you give yourself a hope of a future renaissance.
What would be the most definitive sign that this reset is happening? What do you need to see to know, okay, this is 100% for sure?
I think it becomes undeniable the moment any major oil or commodity exporter like Saudi Arabia or Russia permanently prices and settles its exports in a currency other than U.S. dollars.
Permanently.
Yuan,
I mean, we're seeing that already.
Digital currency, whatever it is, and the large buyers go along. In other words, the entire SCO says we're good. The Belt Road Initiative says we're good. The BRICS say we're good. Very quickly, you have strength in numbers and unity. This is what I think ultimately will happen. But the pieces need to be put in place first. The settlement, the ability to transact outside the SWIFT, the ability to settle in gold in multi-jurisdictional vaults. Let's not forget the SCO is the largest regional military. So, unity, show force, the parade, do all of these things to show that, no, we're not just chumps anymore. We're not third world. We're not to be taken lightly. It will get to that point, and especially if Saudi Arabia came out and said, you know what, the dollar's just taking it on the chin too much. We're going to now start taking predominantly X. We want gold, or we want whatever. That's when you know the game is over. That is the reset, when everyone realizes that holding dollars to purchase energy is something that you don't need to do anymore. It's over.
So as we started off this interview with saying, moving towards a new world order.
The Petro-Yuan bond, what's it called? The new one.
The Electro-yuan.
The Electro-yuan.
The SCO Development Bank, all the railways.
The BRICS New Development Bank, the unit, everything. The pieces are being put into place. You just have to. This is why the analysts never get it, because they don't see all the pieces that you and I study all the time. They don't get it. They don't see it. And maybe if I could sit down with them for a few hours and show them all the pieces and put it together and say, you tell me, what does that puzzle look like? Because if you just focus on a few things, you'll never get it. It's putting everything together. That's how I figured out the BRICS thing way back when, because all of the pieces, this has got to be happening. Mm-hmm. Same thing here. Put all the pieces together and it's undeniable to me. And then you put in what all these sound bites that you've just played only says to me, yeah.
That's just a fraction of the hard data and evidence that we're seeing, just to substantiate some of what you're saying, because you have correctly connected the dots.
I got lucky again, maybe. We'll see.
Is there any way that this does not happen? I always like to ask, what could derail this thesis? What can happen that we do not see this monetary reset, where gold is a base layer?
You tell me. I don't know. What can we do? A country that's $200 trillion in debt with no manufacturing base, what do we do? Why would anyone want to hold our dollars that are being printed away to worthlessness and take our treasuries that can be weaponized and have not performed anywhere near as good as gold? Look at last year. The 10-year treasury was up 4.5%. Gold was up 40. Look at this year. Halfway through the year, that treasury's up 3% on a 4% treasury, or 4.25% treasury. Gold's up almost 40, and the dollar's down 11. And that treasury, your negative real yield. I would simply say this: if Trump gets his way and they're able to lower yields, even granted the federal funds rate doesn't touch the 10-year, but if they're able to bring down treasuries, the big money in the world will not accept a negative real yield, even using the lying CPI number. He wants to bring rates down to around 2% or lower, right? The CPI says we're already at 2.5 or 3. So you're going to tell me I'm taking a real negative real return, even by your own lying numbers, when we know the CPI is a lie and inflation's 10 or 11%. But even using their bogus numbers, you expect me to give you my money for 10 years at a real rate of negative return? Goodbye. I'm going to buy gold. I'm going to buy other things. It's happening. And the surest way to go broke is to fight this, because, I don't know, it just becomes very easy to see that holding dollars at this point of the game is a sucker's game. And I think the world realizes it. I think this is the only way that we get back to a point where people want to hold our dollars. But that's down the road once we start producing things again.
Do you have a timeline
No.
that you think this could happen by?
No.
Is it happening faster than you anticipated?
Some of it, yes. Some of it, no. I mean, you know, you and I started talking about this 3 years ago. It's expanded fast. It's expanded in many ways. But I think the timeline on something like this will be very difficult, because it's not in their vested interest to tell us how far along they are until they're bang, boom, done. You can see little pieces, little crumbs are getting there. But I don't know. I think things will get very interesting by next July 4th. Let's put it that way. If he really does peg gold to the Treasury, as Judy Shelton said, and we do see some form of a gold revaluation. You mentioned Luke Roman. He says something very similar to what I'm saying, and he talks about them letting gold rise organically much higher by then and then revaluing it. Well, look at what it's been doing. Goldman Sachs just came out and said if there is even a 1% move out of Treasuries, if the market feels that the Fed has lost its independence, you'll see gold at 5,000 overnight. Well, doesn't it seem like the Fed has lost its independence already? When the market gets that, I mean, they're saying 4,200 base case, 5,000 if this happens. You got bald money guy I like a lot, says if 20% of treasuries, if people take 20% and put it into gold because the treasuries are losing so much credibility, along the same lines of Goldman Sachs, $9,000 gold, and comes up with these numbers. So bottom line is that, yeah, I think that this is a game that could get very interesting very quick and could accelerate faster than we think. But I would look to July 4th next year as a point to focus on, as something that we should expect to see something interesting by then.
Does Andy Schectman have a gold forecast? You mentioned Goldman Sachs. You mentioned other people.
No,
do
I
you
never
have...
do that. I never do. I think it's silly. But I will say that I think it'll go higher than people think possible. You know, James Rickard says 24,000. Mike Maloney says 10,000. I'll take either of those numbers. Maybe somewhere in between. But I think if they really are going to peg it to the back end of a new system, and all the biggest money in the world has been gobbling it up before the public, I think the big money knows where it's going, and they wouldn't go to the lengths that they are to accumulate it for the last 5 or 6 years, that being the central banks, and now whoever the hell is doing it in the United States, spending well over $100 billion, probably a lot more. They don't do it just for kicks. They do it because they understand a new system is being created, and we better get it before everyone else figures it out. Let's keep holding the price down. Let it rise a little bit, but ask yourself, gold's at $3,600+, and the media, where are you? Where's the media?
It is starting to make its way onto the mainstream.
I mean, little but
not on the level you would expect, considering this kind of move. Andy, you said you don't like to give forecasts and you don't like to give timelines. I want to focus on the idea of time, because that is something we all don't have enough of. That is a resource that nobody can buy. And bring it back to that SCO summit, because there was a very interesting conversation that was caught on a hot mic, the immortality conversation. We talked about how Xi Jinping and Putin can play the long game because they don't have term limits. But now they're also talking about extending their physical lives. And there was this conversation caught by a hot mic, and they were walking towards the grandstand with Kim Jong-un, and Putin's translator was overheard saying that biotechnology is continuously developing. Human organs can be continuously transplanted. The longer you live, the younger you become, and even achieve immortality. That's the footage of it there. Xi then responded, some predict that in this century humans may live up to 150 years old. Now, this clip was then scrubbed from Chinese state television. News agencies were ordered to pull it, but it did manage to spread globally. Putin later confirmed that that exchange took place and confirmed that this is something that they're looking at.
Neither of them seem to look old or ever. I don't know. Maybe they're already onto something.
I mean, they're both in their 70s, but this is something like straight out of a James Bond movie.
Well, people talk about these med beds. You hear it all the time. I don't know. It would be amazing. I don't know.
Here's the question, though. I have it on good authority that you have very high testosterone levels. Would you extend your life? Would you take advantage of this technology?
Why not? I got 3 kids. I'd love to see that their kids grow older, and who wouldn't, right?
I don't know.
Who wouldn't? But at that level, I'm sure they're going to get first dibs on it. God willing, God willing, we can live longer. We're already living longer than they did many years ago. So who's to say it's not the case? Makes it a lot easier to build your global strategy and take your time, as they do in China, if you have a far greater longevity and the ability to live much longer. You caught me by surprise on that one, and I don't know, Michelle. I do think that that the advancements in medical technology, if anyone's going to get it, you're looking at a country like China and Russia, who spend all the time in the world trying to advance things like weapon technology that we don't have, computer technology. These are very smart countries. Who's to say it's not the case? I don't know. Count me in if it is.
Count you in. You'll use some of your gold hoard towards that. It's interesting as we talk about a new world order and we talk about these leaders extending their lives, like I say, something out of a James Bond movie. Andy, we're going to have to wrap it up. Final thoughts.
I would just end it by saying, if all of this is true, if you save in dollars, you're destined to go broke. If you are not a contrarian and looking at the big picture, you're destined to be a victim, period. I stole that one from Rick Rule, my friend, but I believe it sincerely. This is the time to think outside the box. This is the time to be a contrarian. This is the time to own assets and not hold all your wealth in dollars. And I will continue scouring the world's information and try and bring all this to us in real time. It'll be interesting to see how it all plays out, see if I'm right or if I'm just crazy enough or stupid enough to say these things publicly. The jury is still out, but I don't really have much to say other than that. You're right.
The pieces are falling into place. Andy, thank you so much. We'll talk again soon. Really appreciate it. And as always, a big thank you to our viewers for watching. Make sure to subscribe and follow Miles Franklin Media on our various social media platforms. And please leave your comments, leave your feedback. We love hearing from you. So feel free to praise, whine, or just opine. From me, Michelle Makori, and the rest of the team, thank you for watching. We'll see you next time. Stay sovereign.
This is The Real Story with Michelle Makori.